Hello and welcome to Frederica Street Railway. I'm Paul. Today I'm going to cover building the baseboards, or at least the flat baseboards for the goods yard and the head shunt. If you remember from the design stage, these are basically made of 9mm ply together with an under framework. Here's all the ply ready cut from my wood yard. It's much easier to have it sawn on a proper saw rather than try to do it yourself. So we have the back and front sections, we have the interior sections that are going for the braces, and we have the cross brace sections here. But before we can start assembly, we've got to machine the slots and the holes so that it forms the honeycomb support structure. Now I can use my milling machine, CNC machine, to actually cut all the holes and slots in the centre braces. I've made a jig along here so that I can line up the panels, because I'm going to make a lot of these. We first secure them down. Now I need to clean up the parts that have just been machined, cutting out the circles where they've been tabbed into place, and then using some coarse sandpaper, clean up all the rough edges and waste all the splinters. Now that all the parts are made, or at least they're all drilled and machined, before I can start assembly, I'm going to fit the two end pieces that join two sets of baseboards together. I've already drilled holes at the ends to take M8 bolts, but they're not really going to be sufficient to align the baseboard properly if it's taken apart and put back together. So what I'm using are these baseboard dowels from DCC Concepts. As you can see, the baseboard dowels are a little thicker than the actual plywood. So to make sure I get a secure joint, I'm going to add some little plywood spacers like this on either side of the board. So a little bit of glue, and then just tack them into place. And now with the board separated, I can drill the first of the two mounting holes, which gives me a flange. And now with the smaller drill bit, I can drill all the way through. Finally, to put some PVA glue on the threads and then simply push them in. We'll wipe off the excess. This just secures them in place, and now when the two boards go together, they lock together firmly. Now we have to prepare the front pieces so that they will slot in to the mesh that we're going to build with all these internal panels. So first I'm going to line up the somewhat shorter internal pieces with the edge of the top, and now using a square I can mark across where each of the slots are going to come. Now I'm going to take a number of the little pieces of ply, line them all up with the marks I've just made, tack them into place. Now I can use one as a spacer. and that gives me a nice tight slot to glue the side piece into the front. I'm going to now take one of the centre panels. I've put glue along each of the 4 slots, and then this can simply go across and slot down like this. And now I can do the same for the second brace. Line it up. That's it, all further. So with everything dry overnight, I've now put glue along the tops of the subframe. Then I can take the plywood top, which I used to build it, and put it on. Line it up. I use some clamps to just make sure it stays in place. Okay, so there's one of the baseboards finished and dry. But there is always a problem with using plywood as a top surface. It's a great sounding board, and I don't really want to listen to all the noise and the rumble. So what I'm planning to do is to cover the board with these sheets of 20mm expanded polystyrene foam. They're available from various builders merchants and used for insulation. So now instead of we have, I'm genuinely not tapping lighter. So there we are. That's the first baseboard of the goods yard finished. I've stuck the expanded polystyrene down onto the wood with a thing called American glue. Don't quite know what that is. And then leave some weights on top of it to dry overnight. And we're ready for the next step. Hope that's been interesting and potentially useful.